Chris Lee and Blayne Gilmer of Southeastern 14 presented by Stakes here to preview the SEC championship game. This one has been set for a couple of weeks now. Georgia will take on LSU. Both teams had their Saturdays go in very different turns. Georgia struggled with Georgia Tech for a while in Athens before it got right in the second half and kind of ran away with it, while LSU had an unexpected loss to Texas A&M and College Station. Boy, an interesting weekend for both these teams. Didn't see those games necessarily going the way that they did. Although I'm not shocked that Tech gave Georgia a bit of a game, that being a rivalry and Tech playing some defense. But LSU losing in College Station, not one I expected.
Yeah, senior day for Georgia there in Athens, a team that a group of seniors that collectively, I believe, went 46-5 during their time in Athens. So there was kind of emotions running high, and Chris, it's got to be hard to do like the senior day, kind of sappy stuff, and then okay, now let's go get ready to run our face into somebody for 60 minutes type deal. So I think that played a little bit of part too, but also too that Georgia just Tech had a good plan and got some guys out in space and things like that early on, and Georgia had to adjust, but came out. Then you see the fruits of recruiting and depth and things like that in the second half. Georgia really kind of put it on them in the second half. It was 10-7 at half, and ended up being 37-14, and 7 of those points at the end were kind of garbage time. But LSU, just a shocking egg that was laid over there at Kyle Field. Chris, I thought for all the world that this Brian Kelly team, because of how I have a lot of respect for Brian Kelly and what he brings to the table, and I thought that LSU would show a lot more maturity than what they showed coming into that game, and just some uncharacteristic mistakes, even by Jaden Daniels himself, and really cost them. And they just weren't able to recover by the time it got to the late in the midway through the fourth quarter. They couldn't make that push when they needed to, and the Aggies really dominated that performance.
Let's dive into the matchup when LSU's got the ball. Tigers averaging 32.3 a game, Georgia giving up 11.3. Average that together, it's about 22 points a game is what you'd expect when LSU's got the ball against that defense. LSU has lost 11 fumbles and 4 interceptions. Georgia has picked up 5 fumbles and 8 picks. Running plays, and again, we do not count a sack as a running play because what you meant to do was throw the ball. On rushing plays, LSU averaging 5.9, Georgia giving up 3.6. On passing plays, LSU averaging 6.3, Georgia giving up 5.1. Blayne, here is what I think is the key stat. LSU has given up 41 sacks. Georgia's only registered 22. This is not a really get to the quarterback defense, but I remember that Tennessee game where it put a lot of pressure on Hendon Hooker and just wrecked what the Vols wanted to do. And I have a feeling you will see Kirby Smart dial up a lot of the same kind of thing against the Tigers, who have been playing with a pair of freshman tackles all year, if not most of the year.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting, Chris, when it comes to this matchup, because of one, what is the status of Jaden Daniels? Does he play? How limited is he because of that ankle? That as of a couple of hours ago, we record this on a Sunday night. Our preview, Jaden Daniels is in a walking boot. They say that's precautionary, but anytime it's to that severity, who knows how things end up going. It's going to be very interesting. To your point, Georgia does not manufacture a lot of pressures. They don't have to send extra rushers. They try to control the front with their front three, front four, and play more so this year than last year, a bend but not break style of defense. There's been teams get a little bit more yards on Georgia at times, but Chris, even after losing 5 first-round draft picks last year and a total of 15 players from last year's team to the NFL, they're still the number one scoring defense in the country at 11.3 points per game as we end the regular season here. So I think it's going to be interesting to see, do they heat up Jaden Daniels because he is so elusive? They're probably going to have to put a spy on him. Somebody like a Smile Munden, I think you'll see in that role a lot. Even a Jalen Walker, who's a true freshman linebacker that they could use in that role as well. Two guys that can really run. So I think you're going to see Georgia pick their spots. I think they will bring some pressure at times. Javon Bullard, a name to keep in mind there. It comes from the secondary level a lot of times and rushes the passer. But it's going to be interesting. I think the matchup of LSU's receivers on Georgia's corners, I think there's times where Georgia's corners are pretty vulnerable. So when they do pick those spots to heat them up, can Jaden Daniels get it out in time and get it a one-on-one with a Malik Neighbors, a Kayshawn Booty to against a Keely Ringo, against a Kamari Laster, where I think LSU might have a little success.
Yeah, I'm reading from ESPN. This is Sunday night. This was at 5:42 Central. This per ESPN's Alex Scarborough says LSU quarterback Jaden Daniels is currently wearing a walking boot, which you said, to help with a sprained ankle. But Brian Kelly says he hopes he will be able to practice on Tuesday. Kelly said Sunday that Daniels' medical exam went well and that the injury is not considered to be a high ankle sprain, a more serious injury that can require a longer recovery time. Okay, even if Daniels is hobbled a little bit, I think that changes a lot of what LSU wants to do. Daniels is just a gazelle with the ball in his hands. He gets into secondaries, he makes stuff happen, he keeps chains moving, and so that'll be interesting to watch. Even if Jaden Daniels plays, I do wonder how tender that ankle might be, because that's a big part of what LSU does, is just have the threat of him being able to run.
I mean, just look at it, on their stats. He's got 824 rushing yards on the year, Chris. The next highest on their team is Josh Williams at 477. And I will say Josh Williams has came on late in the stretch run here for LSU and has done some really good work for them. But, Georgia only allows, we talked about the pass rush, Georgia allows 3 yards a carry, total, even, with everything included, 3 yards a carry on the year. It is a defense that you may do a lot of things to. You may get some chunk plays. You're not going to run on them in terms of conventional running styles. So having Jaden Daniels' legs and those at full capacity is important, I think. And I think, Chris, I think Vegas sees that, as it's on our ticker, and you've said before, 17.5 point favorite. I think that's partially the reason is because how good Georgia is against the run. And I think LSU's inability to, so far this year, to consistently run it in a more traditional way without having Jaden Daniels do most of that heavy lifting.
Yeah, what the problem has been for LSU is once you put those sack numbers in there, the passing per play, 6.3 per attempt, has not been all that impressive. But like as we've noted several times, LSU's got a stellar group of athletes at receiver and tight end. And that's where, as you said, Georgia has been a little like, if you had to pick a spot where Georgia can look vulnerable at times, it would be the secondary.
Yeah, and more so the corners, because
Yeah.
you thought coming into the year that Chris Smith, who let's face it, Chris Smith is a leader. He's done a lot of things, but he's not the fastest in the world at that safety position. You would think some people could try to isolate him, much like Jalen Hyatt was isolated against. Helms for Alabama. They found that matchup and they kept going at it. You would think that people would do that to Georgia a little bit at times, but man, Malachi Starks and Chris Smith have played solid. Where they've been hurt at times is Kamari Lassiter and Keely Ringo, and shockingly, more so Keely Ringo, who NFL scouts repetitively are putting as a top 15 pick in the upcoming NFL draft because of his size and his ability to his 4.3 speed. But it's just times where he just doesn't play the ball in the air well at times, Chris. And I know Georgia fans would say, well, what about the national championship game and the run back? And then, of course, he had the pick against Tennessee that was great, and the pick against Kentucky. Yes, he's made some phenomenal picks. But there's also been quite a few times where he's been targeted and other teams have had success. Kirby Smart will tell you, hey, that's just the nature of being on an island and the way that Georgia puts them on an island in their defense, Chris. So, from time to time, I guess those things happen. And listen, Keely Ringo is a phenomenal athlete. I'm just saying, if there is one way that LSU, in my mind, can have a lot of success offensively, I think it's hitting some big plays when they get one-on-ones with those Georgia corners.
Okay, before we talk about the other side of the matchup, let's talk about our presenting sponsor, Stakes. You can predict sports better than the crowd for a chance to win NFTs. With Stakes, players can can cement their sports predictions against friends, other fans, and influencers forever. Don't let your sports genius go overlooked. Join Stakes and have the best predictions captured in the moment. Head to playwithstakes.com/14. Use our invite code Southeastern14 for a double welcome bonus. We'll have some picks and prop bets in there. I say bets. It is a predictions app and not a betting app, although you can win things. You can win NFTs. It's all free. Let us know about when you beat us with your picks, whatever. Just go in the app and have some fun with it. And again, we will have several things in there for the upcoming championship game. Okay, when Georgia's got the ball, Stetson Bennett, a 2-year starter that's won a ton of games there. Georgia averages 38.25 points a game. LSU giving up 21.5. Georgia's lost 10 fumbles and 6 picks, which is what LSU has gained, both those respectively. Bennett rarely gets sacked. He's been sacked 7 times all year. That's phenomenal. Georgia's got a big, fantastic offensive line, and Bennett is mobile. LSU has registered 25 sacks. Rushing plays, Georgia averaging 5.7 per rush play. LSU giving up 4.7. Georgia averaging 8.3 a pass play. LSU giving up 6.0. The Bulldogs running game with Kenny McIntosh has really picked up some steam lately too, Blayne.
Oh, yeah. I think Kenny McIntosh is playing the best football of his career right now. Senior Bowl director Jim Nagy, who I'm sure you follow, Chris, and a lot of people follow out here. He was in attendance at the game Saturday and saying how Kenny McIntosh is one of the most overlooked prospects in the entire 2023 upcoming draft because he can do everything, catch balls out of the backfield. He pass protects well. Saturday against Georgia Tech, he had 86 yards rushing, I think 96 yards receiving, something along those lines. He became only the second player to have an 80-80 game for Georgia since the year 2000, and Todd Gurley was the other one to do it. So not bad company over there for that. But yeah, the offense has been pretty consistent. There's been a couple of red zone issues against Kentucky and even against Georgia Tech this past weekend. But I think almost at some point, Chris, we're starting to look at this Georgia team and they become a victim of their own success at times. Because whenever there's any just not blatant, you start off a year like they did against Oregon and just total
The bar's pretty high.
They could do whatever they wanted to. I think that you've set that expectation. Stetson Bennett on the years had a tremendous season. 31 over 3,100 passing yards, which is I think more than a lot of people expected coming into the year. But I was just shocked in terms of the matchup here, Chris. Texas A&M, especially Devon Achane, who I think Kenny McIntosh plays a lot like. He's a bigger back than Devon Achane, but he plays a lot like him in terms of his quickness and his ability. He's not quite as fast, but man, 215 yards on the ground by himself alone against LSU. I was surprised that front gave up that much, but there have been games when you go back and look at even Florida and Tennessee and games like that they've been susceptible to giving up the run this year, Chris.
Yeah, and let's talk LSU for a minute. LSU's got a lot of guys along the defensive line that've seen a lot of snaps in this league, and it's got Harold Perkins, who's the next
Phenomenal player.
yeah, gonna be a superstar linebacker in the NFL. Stylistically, what challenges does that present Georgia?
Well, I mean, with having two bookends like BJ Ojolari and Harold Perkins, it's not like you can say, okay, well, we're gonna set the protection this way all the time, or we're gonna run away from this guy all the time. They've got two really good guys on the edges, and of course they got Mingo in the middle. I mean, it's absolutely a tough front, and that's why I was surprised that Texas A&M had their way against that front. That front seven of LSU is pretty dang good in terms of when you look on the hoof and the talent. But I just think that at times there's some lapses when it comes to tackling. There's some lapses when it comes to making sure there's being gap sound and not chasing things, whether that's some youthfulness coming out or whether that's still being first year in a defensive system, things of that nature. But I think LSU just needs to find more consistency in terms of stopping the run, which in big games they've not been able to do that. And I think that's what Georgia, particularly late, there's two things that you have to do to win a SEC championship and a national championship, because you got to be able to run the ball and stop the run. And I think that's what kind of gives Georgia the edge right now, at least going into this game on paper, is that they can do both things quite effectively.
We always talk about some other things before we wrap up with picks. LSU has been penalized more than Georgia this year by about 15 or 20 yards from a game from memory. Special teams have been a disaster for LSU most of the year. Georgia is very steady in the kicking game. Of course, both players have got athletes who can break returns, but Georgia's had better special teams. So that's an area that people don't look at a lot, but I think that's a place where the matchup tilts towards Georgia a little bit more too.
I mean, Jack Podlesny, Kirby Smart said it. He said when you've got a really good defense, he said your kicker becomes important. That's what he said this past week after the Georgia Tech game, because a reporter asked him on the consistency of Jack Podlesny. He nailed a 51-yarder that I swear would have been good from 61. Chris, I mean, he's got a strong leg. And Kirby said when your defense is really good, he goes, your kicker becomes important. And that's because you don't always have to go for touchdowns. You can afford to kick the field goal because you have confidence in your defense to stop them. So, Jack Podlesny, really good. Brett Thorson, really, you could argue that Brett Thorson, the punter for Georgia, made one of the best plays of the season with that 75-yard punt against Tennessee that pinned them on their
rocket.
on their 1 yard line. A huge play in the momentum of that game. So definitely the kicking game has been advantageous to Georgia. And it is an advantage. I did want to put up something here, Chris. This is from our friends over at UGA Sports, Ronnie Nabolsi and those guys put up. Just look how dominant Georgia has been here during this run for Kirby Smart. Georgia went back to back 12-0 for the first time in school history. Yeah. Only the third time in the last 40 years it's happened in the SEC. 95, 96 Florida, 2008, 2009 Alabama. They've won 30 of their last 31 games, undefeated at home for the fifth time in 7 seasons, 33-2 against the SEC East since 2017. And this is Kirby Smart's fifth SEC championship appearance in the last 6 seasons. Chris, I think it's almost getting, when Georgia is close in a game, it's almost like, oh, we better turn it over there because this team's playing Georgia a close game. They get on that upset alert even when somebody's close for a couple quarters. I think Georgia, like I said, they're almost becoming a victim of their own success at this point, and it's I think it's quite evident when you go into an SEC championship game. I don't care if the other team has 3 losses or not, and you're a 17-point favorite.
Well, this one won't be at home, but it'll be close in Atlanta. I would predict Georgia to have the advantage in the stands there too. You look at the line, Georgia's a 17-point favorite as we do this on Sunday night, over under of 50. That implies a final score of 34-17 in Georgia's favor. Sounds about right to me. I guess if I had to make a prediction, I would probably take Georgia to cover just because of the experience. It feels like LSU is ahead of schedule. Nobody had LSU winning the division and getting here. It's been a phenomenal year for Brian Kelly and the Tigers. Again, nobody expected this, but I think that the Daniels injury clouds the picture a little bit more, and the way that LSU didn't show up, I guess, in College Station. Look, A&M's a very talented team, so
Yeah.
it's not like they lost to chumps, but
Well, and to the point that we made when we say Georgia's won 30 of their last 31, that to me, what happened to LSU this past weekend on the road, that makes it that much more impressive what Georgia's done, Chris, because in the SEC, you can get beat every single week. It doesn't
yeah.
matter. You can get beat every single week. And I think LSU saw that. But you're exactly right. I think LSU is in a phenomenal spot as a program. Brian Kelly is recruiting his tail off down there at LSU, something that many people questioned whether he would be able to do that or not at an LSU program, and he is doing so. In fact, what people need to know, he's recruiting the state of Georgia quite well. So they may even make some recruiting stops, while they're down there in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Look at some guys. So this LSU program is going to be here for a while, in my opinion, under Brian Kelly. I think they're going to be back to prominence here. Year one SEC championship game. I think if you'd have told LSU fans that before the season, they would have signed up for it with no hesitation.
Yeah, you'd be a fool to expect anything other than Brian Kelly having LSU relevant year in and year out for the foreseeable future. But again, seems a little premature to expect the Tigers to win this one, but what's your call?
Well, I just think I've learned not to doubt Kirby Smart in big games anymore. It seems like time and time again Georgia rises to the occasion with him there. As those numbers we threw out earlier, LSU has a young offensive line. I think freshman offensive tackles. They're thinned out a little bit on that defensive front. Have had some issues stopping the run. So I think Georgia's in the trenches gets it done in this game. I think Georgia wins their second SEC championship under Kirby Smart, and I think they cover.
Okay, we will update you on everything on our Wednesday night live stream. If there's any injuries, in addition to this, of course, the health of Jaden Daniels will be something we will monitor. Best way to get all that is to subscribe to our channel. It costs you nothing. So hit that, hit the like button if you don't mind. That helps us too. Thank you for watching Southeastern 14 presented by Stakes. We'll see you on the Wednesday night live stream. And we've got plenty more content coming up this week, including all kinds of hoop stuff. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon at Southeastern 14.